Let's play a little game. Close your eyes for just a moment and picture the faces of your family, your parents, your siblings, your cousins, your spouse, even your children. Now ask yourself, what do you really know about them? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone sitting at that family dinner table is who they appear to be. Some are warm, trustworthy, and kind. But others hide something much darker beneath the smile, beneath the polite small talk, beneath the very blood ties that connect you. I'm talking about the dark triad. And if you've never heard that phrase before, buckle up. Because once you do, you'll never look at certain family members the same way again. The dark triad is not a comic book villain or a shadowy cult. It's a psychological term. A cluster of 3 deeply troubling personality traits that, when combined, create some of the most manipulative, ruthless, and emotionally destructive people you'll ever meet. And what makes it worse? You don't encounter these people only in movies, politics, or business. Sometimes, they live right inside your home. They share your blood. They share your secrets. And they may have been shaping your life in ways you never realized. But here's the kicker. The dark triad isn't rare. In fact, researchers estimate that a noticeable percentage of the population carries these traits, which means the odds are frighteningly high that someone in your family, yes, your family, embodies this shadowy psychology. Now, before you start scanning the room at Thanksgiving dinner wondering who's plotting what, let's get one thing clear. People with dark triad traits are not always obvious. They don't always look evil. They're not necessarily violent criminals or monsters lurking in basements. Often, they're charming, charismatic, even successful. They're the ones who seem magnetic at family gatherings, who always get their way, who somehow make you feel guilty when you try to stand up for yourself. And you might have dismissed it. You might have brushed it off, saying, "Oh, that's just how Uncle so-and-so is," or "My sister has always been like that." But what if those patterns weren't just quirks? What if they were symptoms of something far more dangerous, something that psychologists have been studying for decades? In this video, we're going to peel back the mask. I'm going to take you deep inside the psychology of the dark triad. By the end, you'll not only know exactly what it is, but you'll also start recognizing it in the people around you. You'll begin to connect the dots, recalling moments that once felt confusing or even haunting. And here, the warning. Once you see the dark triad, you can't unsee it. So let's begin. The dark triad. It sounds like something straight out of a secret society or a horror novel. But in reality, it's a psychological framework. 3 distinct personality traits that, when combined, create a chilling type of individual. Those 3 traits are narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Now you might be thinking, okay, I've heard of narcissism before. Maybe I even joke that my brother's a narcissist because he takes too many selfies. But this isn't about jokes. These traits aren't lighthearted quirks. They're not just annoying habits. They're psychological engines that drive people to manipulate, exploit, and harm others while feeling very little guilt about it. And here's the part that should make you lean in closer. People with these traits don't need to be strangers. They don't need to be bosses, politicians, or celebrities. They can be the ones you grew up with, the people you trusted most, the ones who raised you, or the ones you're raising right now. Think about it like this. Families are supposed to be safe havens. When life outside gets messy, home is the place you return to for comfort, right? But what happens when the danger isn't outside the walls? It's inside them. What happens when the person who hugs you at Christmas is the same person subtly eroding your confidence, twisting your words, and bending you to their will? This is where the dark triad becomes so terrifying. It hides in plain sight. Imagine your aunt. She's glamorous, always dressed perfectly, always making the conversation revolve around her. She talks about her achievements, her struggles, her dramas, and somehow, even when you share something important, she brings the spotlight back to herself. On the surface, it might feel like vanity, but what if it's narcissism, a trait rooted in entitlement, self-obsession, and a deep need for control? Or picture that cousin who always seems to get their way, not by force but by calculation. They know exactly what to say to different family members, playing them against each other like chess pieces. They don't raise their voice, but somehow everyone bends to their plan. That's Machiavellianism, the art of manipulation without conscience. And then there's the uncle or sibling who never seems to feel guilt. They lie with a straight face, they cause pain without blinking, and when confronted, they shrug it off as if emotions were a foreign language. That's psychopathy. Cold, detached, and often shockingly effective at getting what they want. Here's the disturbing truth. Each of these traits on their own is bad enough. But when they overlap, when one person carries all three, the result is a personality that can devastate entire families. Not with physical violence necessarily, but with a slow, poisonous erosion of trust, love, and connection. And maybe right now, you're replaying certain memories. Times when someone in your family made you feel small. Times when you walked away from a conversation doubting yourself. Times when you felt trapped, manipulated, or drained, and you couldn't explain why. You might not have had the language for it before, but psychologists do, and they call it the dark triad. But here, where it gets even more unsettling, these traits don't show up with neon signs. There's no big reveal where someone announces, "Hey, I'm a Machiavellian narcissist." No, they blend in, they charm, they smile, they love bomb. And while you're lulled into a sense of safety, they're quietly rewriting the rules of your family, making sure the game is always rigged in their favor. And once you start seeing the patterns, you'll realize the dark triad doesn't just affect individuals, it infects entire family systems. So the question is, how do you spot it before it consumes everything? Let's break this down. Because it's one thing to know the three traits by name: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. But it's another thing entirely to see them in action, to recognize how they quietly play out in the dynamics of a family. So let's step inside some familiar scenarios. Narcissism in the family. Picture a family dinner. The table is set, everyone is catching up, and laughter fills the air. Then someone begins speaking, maybe it's you. You share some good news, something personal. Maybe you've earned a promotion, maybe your child did well in school, maybe you're just proud of yourself for once. But before you even finish the sentence, there's that one relative. The one who leans in, interrupts, and suddenly, the story isn't about you anymore. It's about them. Their struggles, their sacrifices, their achievements. They hijack the spotlight with surgical precision, and by the time they're done, no one even remembers what you were saying. That's narcissism at work. It's more than just self-centeredness, it's a hunger, a craving for attention, admiration, and validation that never ends. And in families, narcissists often become emotional black holes. They absorb all the praise, all the energy, all the focus, leaving everyone else orbiting around their ego. And here's the twist: they can be charming. They can shower you with compliments and affection when it serves them. But it's not love, it's leverage. Because when you stop feeding their ego, the warmth disappears and suddenly you're the villain. Maybe you felt that coldness. Maybe you've wondered why it feels like love in your family comes with conditions. Machiavellianism in the family. Now let's talk about something subtler. The cousin, the sibling, or even the parent who seems to always get what they want. Not by shouting, not by fighting, but by weaving invisible strings. They know which buttons to press. They know who's weak, who's loyal, who's desperate for approval. They plant seeds of doubt, stir up little conflicts, and then step back while everyone else does the fighting. By the time the dust settles, they're exactly where they wanted to be, untouched, in control, quietly victorious. That's Machiavellianism. It's manipulation raised to an art form. It thrives in families because families are built on trust, and trust is the perfect tool for exploitation. The Machiavellian relative might act like a peacemaker, but in reality, they're the puppeteer. They might present themselves as just trying to help, but somehow, their help always benefits them most. Think back. Has there ever been someone in your family who always played two sides against the middle? Someone who somehow convinced others to fight their battles for them? Someone who walked away clean while everyone else was left in chaos? That's not just strategy, that's the Machiavellian touch. Psychopathy in the family. And then the darkest of the three, psychopathy. This one is harder to face because it's colder. It's not about attention like narcissism, and it's not about careful manipulation like Machiavellianism. It's about a chilling lack of empathy. Imagine a relative who hurts others, emotionally, financially, even physically, and feels nothing. No guilt, no shame, no remorse. They might lie without flinching, they might cheat without hesitation, and when confronted, their eyes are empty, as though you're the foolish one for expecting them to care. That's psychopathy. And while not every psychopath is violent, the emotional wreckage they leave behind is real. They can drain families dry of money, of trust, of love, while moving on without a second thought. If you've ever been in tears in front of someone you love, begging them to understand, and all they did was shrug, smirk, or change the subject, that coldness may not have been indifference. It may have been psychopathy. Now here's the most terrifying part. These traits often overlap. A narcissistic relative who also has Machiavellian cunning is not just self-absorbed, they're dangerous. A Machiavellian who also has psychopathic coldness can devastate a family without blinking. And when all three traits merge in one person, you're dealing with someone who doesn't just hurt people, they control them. And family is the perfect environment for them, because family ties make it harder to see clearly, harder to break free, harder to accept that the person you share blood with might be playing you like a pawn. Now, it's one thing to describe these traits in theory, but it's another to live with them, to grow up under their shadow, to feel the invisible scars they leave behind. So let's talk about the impact, the emotional aftermath of having a dark triad personality in your family. The cycle of charm and cruelty. Dark triad personalities rarely show their hand all at once. Instead, they operate in cycles. First comes the charm, the love bombing, the warmth that makes you feel safe, special, chosen. They shower you with attention, compliments, maybe even gifts. You think, finally they see me. Finally I matter. But then just as quickly the mask slips. Suddenly you're criticized, mocked, guilt-tripped. You're told you're ungrateful, too sensitive, too selfish. You're reminded of every mistake, every flaw, every reason you don't measure up. This roller coaster, affection one moment, cruelty the next, isn't random. It's a system. It keeps you hooked, always chasing the good side of them, always hoping the warmth will return if you just try harder. It's psychological conditioning, and it works frighteningly well inside families, where love and loyalty run deep. Gaslighting, warping your reality. Then there's gaslighting. If you've ever been made to question your own memory, your own judgment, your own sanity, then you've felt it sting. A dark triad family member is a master of this. They'll deny things they said, twist your words, or insist you're overreacting. You might recall a hurtful comment they made and they'll laugh. "I never said that, you're imagining things." You might express pain and they'll reply, "You're too sensitive, you always exaggerate." Over time, this doesn't just confuse you, it rewires you. You begin doubting yourself. You stop trusting your instincts. And worst of all, you start believing them more than you believe yourself. That's the goal, because if they can control your perception of reality, they can control you. The weight of guilt and obligation. Families run on love, but dark triad personalities twist love into leverage. They know how to wield guilt like a weapon. After everything I've done for you, you're going to let me down like this. Family always sticks together. Don't you dare walk away. Sound familiar? They trap you in obligation, reminding you that blood is thicker than water, that loyalty is sacred, that leaving or resisting makes you the bad guy. And because it's family, because you've been conditioned to put them first, you cave, over and over. This guilt is especially heavy in cultures where family honor, duty, or tradition are emphasized. It becomes a chain around your neck, an invisible leash that keeps you bound to the very person harming you. The emotional fallout. So what happens when you live in this environment for years? You start shrinking. You silence yourself to avoid conflict. You carry anxiety into every interaction, waiting for the next attack. You learn to tiptoe, to second guess, to over-explain yourself just to keep the peace. Worse, you internalize it. You start thinking maybe you are the problem. Maybe you really are too sensitive, too weak, too ungrateful. That self-doubt lingers long after the interaction ends. It echoes through your relationships, your work, even your self-worth. And this is what makes the dark triad so destructive in families. It doesn't just manipulate situations, it rewires lives. It creates adults who don't trust themselves, children who grow up believing love must be earned through suffering, and siblings who carry silent rivalries long into adulthood. It's not just one person's darkness, it's a ripple effect that distorts entire generations. So now the question becomes, how do you recognize it? How do you know if someone in your family carries the dark triad? Recognizing the patterns. It starts with awareness, noticing the patterns you once dismissed as quirks or just the way they are. Do they constantly turn conversations back to themselves, dismissing your feelings? Do they manipulate family members like chess pieces, always a step ahead in their schemes? Do they lie, cheat, or hurt without guilt, and somehow make you feel guilty instead? When you notice these behaviors repeating, when they form a pattern rather than a one-off moment, you may be staring at the dark triad in action. And here's something to remember. These people are often skilled at hiding in plain sight. They're not obvious villains. They're charming, funny, even generous when it suits them. That's what makes them so disarming. Protecting yourself. But what do you do if you recognize these traits in someone close to you, someone in your family? Here's the hard truth. You cannot change them. You cannot love a dark triad personality into becoming kind. You cannot reason them into empathy. They are who they are. What you can do is protect yourself. You can set boundaries, even if they push back. You can limit the power they have over your emotions, your finances, your decisions. You can choose distance, even if it feels unnatural in a family setting. Because here's the reality. Family ties are powerful, but they are not a license for abuse. Blood may be thick, but your mental health, your peace, your future, they matter more. The uncomfortable truth. And here's the most unsettling truth of all. You might love them. You might love your narcissistic parent, your Machiavellian sibling, your psychopathic uncle. You might feel guilty at the very thought of pulling away. But love without safety isn't love. It's bondage. And once you see the dark triad clearly, you have a choice. Keep playing their game or step away from the board. Closing reflection. So let me leave you with a question. When you think about your family, the ones you see at holidays, the ones you grew up with, the ones you trust with your secrets, do you feel safe? Or do you feel drained? Do you feel seen or do you feel invisible? Do you feel loved or do you feel controlled? Because if your answer leans toward the latter, you may not be imagining things. You may be standing face to face with the dark triad. And once you know that, you can never go back. You can never look at them the same way again. So ask yourself, do you know someone like this in your family? And if you do, what will you do next? Here's the truth most people don't want to admit. The dark triad doesn't just live in strangers. It doesn't only belong to villains on the big screen. Sometimes it sits across from you at the dinner table. Sometimes it raised you. Sometimes it wears your last name. And once you recognize it, once you see the manipulation, the coldness, the endless hunger for control, you realize something chilling. Not everyone in your family truly wants the best for you. But here's the light in the darkness. Awareness breaks the spell. The moment you see the pattern, the moment you call it what it is, you take back your power. Their grip weakens. Their games lose their edge. Because while they may thrive in shadows, the one thing the dark triad cannot survive is exposure. So tonight, as you think back on your family, your past, your present, ask yourself, who do I feel safe with, and who makes me doubt myself? That answer might be the most important truth you'll ever face. The dark triad, awareness is survival. Protect your mind, protect your peace.